The following video refers to the traffic pattern and landing tasks required in the FAA Commercial Glider Pilot Practical Test Standards. In this video, we'll cover items from Section 3, Area of Operation, Airport and Glider Port Operations, Item B, Task Traffic Patterns, and Section 4, Area of Operation, Launches and Landings, Items Q, Normal and Crosswind Landings, and Item S, Downwind Landing. For the task Traffic Patterns, the objective is to determine that the applicant exhibits knowledge of the elements related to traffic pattern procedures for gliders, follows established traffic pattern procedures, maintains awareness of other traffic in the pattern, maintains proper ground track with crosswind correction if necessary, crosses designated points at appropriate altitudes unless conditions make such action impractical, selects touchdown and stop points, adjusts glide path and track promptly to compensate for unexpected lift, sink, or changes in wind velocity, makes smooth, coordinated turns with a bank angle not to exceed 45 degrees when turning final approach, adjust flaps, spoilers, or dive brakes as appropriate, recognizes and makes appropriate corrections for the effect of the wind, and completes the prescribed checklist if applicable. In both the normal and crosswind landings, the applicant must fly a landing pattern that assures the glider will always be able to fly a final approach path that is not too high or too low. Note that a glider pilot may modify the illustrated rectangular shape of the typical airplane-type traffic pattern in order to achieve the goal of landing the glider in the predetermined landing area and not short of the runway. For example, a glider pilot may decide to make an early turn from the downwind leg to base leg if a strong headwind on final exists, or if suspected sinking air or a wind gradient might result in a low or slow final approach. Discuss these possibilities and when it would be appropriate to use a flexible, goal-oriented pattern with your glider flight instructor. Area of Operation 4. Launches and Landings. Item Q, the task, landings, normal and crosswind landing. Note, if a crosswind condition does not exist, the applicant's knowledge of crosswind elements shall be evaluated through oral testing. The objective is to determine that the applicant exhibits knowledge of the elements related to a normal and crosswind approach and landing procedures. The applicant must be aware of the wind direction or wind speed and should verbalize to the examiner any changes in the wind speed or direction and any effect on the glider landing approach. Timely adjustments should be made throughout the landing pattern to assure a final approach that is over the extended center line of the runway. Height adjustments may include recognizing the effects of sinking air masses or rising air in the pattern. Subtle changes in the vertical speed may be monitored by the variometer trends and may require timely adjustment of the flaps, spoilers, or dive brakes as appropriate. A target airspeed is selected per the glider flight manual and for the effects of the winds aloft. Maintain the target airspeed within plus or minus 5 knots per the Commercial Glider Practical Test Standards. The applicant will maintain directional control and adjust the ground track for any crosswind drift with proper spacing from the runway throughout the pattern, or adjusting the timing of the turns in the pattern, or by crab or slip method as appropriate. The applicant should verbalize any compensating flight path adjustments to the examiner. Smooth and timely and positive application of the controls during round out and touchdown are required. Control movements should be timely in reaction to glider height or drift and result in a touchdown with no side loading on the landing wheels due to a drift from a crosswind. Upon touchdown, The glider's longitudinal axis must be aligned with the desired landing path and the touchdown be within the designated landing area. After rollout, the applicant will stop within 100 feet of a designated point ahead. Due to misunderstandings of this objective, the recent FAA clarification in the Practical Test Standards states, "The applicant shall touch down and roll to a point designated by the examiner, stopping within 100 feet of the designated point without rolling past it." The point should be far enough away from the touchdown point that should not require more than light to medium braking to come to a stop within the required distance. The applicant must maintain directional and lateral control during the landing roll. Recognizing that the glider may weather vane into a crosswind is required, along with keeping the wings level with aileron inputs as long as possible. After the glider stops, the applicant will complete the appropriate checklist. It is recommended that the applicant move the glider clear of the runway for other aircraft as appropriate. Area of Operation 4, Launches and Landings. Item S, the task, Landings, Downwind Landing. The objective is to determine that the applicant exhibits knowledge of the elements related to downwind landings, including safety-related factors. Adjusts flaps, spoilers, or dive brakes as appropriate. Maintains recommended approach airspeed within plus or minus 5 knots. Uses proper downwind landing procedures. Maintains proper directional control during touchdown and rollout. Applies brakes smoothly to bring the glider to a stop. Common student errors. Not recognizing the effect of a crosswind on the flight path. Not adjusting for a change in wind direction and wind speed that may have occurred after takeoff and during free flight that may affect the flight path in the approach and landing. An early turn from base leg to final. Angling toward the runway on final approach may require a last-second turn with a wingtip close to the ground or obstacles. A delayed turn from base to final that results in an overshoot of the turn to final, perhaps by not recognizing a tailwind on the base leg. Not making coordinated turns in the pattern. Skidding the turn to align the glider after an overshoot on final approach is dangerous. Not recognizing the need to timely extend or reduce the spoilers, flaps, or dive brakes to control the glide path. This task in the PTS requires smooth, timely, and positive control application throughout the approach and touchdown. Insufficient airspeed and altitude when crossing the last obstacle, or not recognizing a wind gradient that may cause the glider to make a very low energy approach and possibly land short of the runway. Hunting for the ground during roundout, possibly resulting in pilot-induced oscillations. Pitching up after roundout to an excessive nose-high attitude just above the runway, resulting in a stall into the ground. Forcing the glider onto the runway, usually when the pilot has flown past the desired touchdown point, often a result of excessive airspeed on final approach or insufficient extension of spoilers, flaps, or dive brakes. After touchdown, slow to recognize and react if the glider weather vanes into a crosswind, allowing it to roll left or right well outside the designated landing area. After touchdown, allowing a wing to drop on the tip by not being proactive in keeping the wings level. Greater inputs may be required by the pilot to maintain wings level as long as possible. As the glider slows, the controls will become less effective. After stopping, not completing an appropriate checklist. Discuss this PTS requirement with your flight instructor. For example, a checklist may be as short as get out of the glider, check for landing air traffic, promptly move the glider clear of the landing area, turn off electrical and oxygen systems, close and lock the canopies, Secure or tie down the glider to prevent wind damage. Install control locks. Common student errors: downwind landing, not flying an appropriate pattern, accounting for the drift on base leg and a higher ground speed on final approach. Slow to recognize changes in altitude or the effect of the glider from any vertical movement of sinking or rising air in the landing pattern and final approach, and adjusting the flaps, spoilers, or dive brakes as appropriate. Not maintaining an appropriate predetermined indicated airspeed plus or minus 5 knots per the commercial glider pilot practical test standards. Does not utilize the standard downwind landing procedures referenced in the glider flight manual or the FAA glider flying handbook. Does not recognize the changes in ground track and increased ground speed on final approach or at round out and touchdown when making a downwind landing. Not recognizing that on the longer rollout after touchdown on a downwind landing, the flight controls become much less effective as the glider slows down. The pilot must anticipate this loss of control effectiveness on the rollout so the glider remains in control near the center line of the landing area. As the glider landing roll distance may be much farther than usual after touchdown when landing downwind, the pilot fails to smoothly apply wheel brake in a timely manner to stop the glider at a desired point.